This juniper is one of a whole bunch of junipers that a friend of mine and I got maybe 4 years ago from a befriended bonsai artist who did have too many and just wanted to get rid of them. And we bought them to do some practicing on. And this is one of the trees that I'm building into a literati. And as you can tell, it has been wired once before. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, I got the wire off the main trunk, setting the main shape. And I also did some work on the deadwood, some initial styling. Yeah, now it's time to get it out of this pot. And also I want to work here on the live vein. The live vein here is very wide. And what you can tell, here it looks really, really cool. Nice piece of deadwood. I think that's going to define the front of my tree. But if you go up along the living part, it gets really, really wide. And it looks as if the trunk gets a lot wider at this point. So what I want to do, I want to split off the live vein here. Extend this deadwood here into the trunk so that you get a much narrower live vein going down. But I need to pay attention. There's a nice curve here in the live vein and I want to keep that. I want to keep it visible. Once that is done, I am going to repot it, put it in a smaller pot and then get it settled in. So late winter maybe I can rewire this tree so it fits in the pot nicely. The reason why I do the live vein now, this will define how it's going to fit in the pot. This deadwood needs to be visible. That's also going to define how it sits in the pot. And after that only I can put the foliage in the right position. Otherwise it might just look ugly once I've potted it up. In any case, let's dive in. This is all dead. And there's bark going down here, but it doesn't continue all the way at the bottom. So what I want to do is I want to remove everything that goes down here towards the bottom. And how? Well, I'm going to assume that this here might all be alive. And then here you see a tiny little crack. That crack is what is going to define for me the edge of the live part. So basically up to here. And then I just stick this in. Trying to lift the bark. And then just pull it upwards. And slowly this way you can lift the bark off, hopefully. Creating not too much damage in the tree. As you can tell, this is still all living tissue, but I don't think it has an important role to play. I think that is something to realize if you're working on juniper. There could be a lot of bark that is still alive, but it is not actually a main carrier of the sap. This tool that I'm using is a multifunctional deadwood tool. To be honest, I'm not sure who made it. I just got it on a market square. It's really nice. It is blunt, yet not so blunt that I can't cut with it. It is just enough to scrape off pieces of wood without going too deep into the material. So you can tell this is actually all dead already. So it was a good choice to say I'm going to remove all this here. There's a tiny sliver of living here, but most of it is dead. So this all becomes nice white deadwood afterwards. Cracks in the bark typically are a delineation between active and less active bark, because at the point where the active bark clearly shows an increment in thickness, you get cracking of the bark. Easy as that. Right. So what I'm after here is that this is the living bark coming down, that it runs into this shallow, coming back down and then around. So what I need to do is, here is a nice crack. So this is a part where I want to open it up. I want it to go all the way here, down and back over. So this is the natural line where two branches meet, and I can just pull that down and then follow the markings that I put in the bark just below, and I would get something like this shape going back down and then meeting up with the living tissue down there. I should actually be using my other tool for this. It's much stronger than just a knife. Anyway, you get the idea. I'll do it off camera now. I guess the same here on this side. This area here I want to make narrower, so that this deadwood extends more clearly into this deadwood patch, leaving only quite narrow vein coming up along the trunk into this branch. Same as before. Use my other tool to tease off the bark. Removing old bark is always easier when it is still moist. When it has dried out completely, so it has been dead for a year or more, then the bark doesn't come off all this easily. I want to put this in another pot so that in spring I can complete the styling, but doing this work is also quite stressing for the tree. My recommendation would be that if you are a more patient person than me, to split these types of work, repot, and then a few months later, once that's settled in this new pot, you do this sort of work on the bark. Right. Suppose that's as done as it's going to be today. Last little bits will come off over the winter. So what I was hoping to remove the root that comes up here is impossible, because it actually feeds in a large proportion of the root ball. I already halved what was here. There was another clump here and I took that off. But there's lots of nice feeder roots on this side. So I am pretty confident in the next repotting, so in 2 years time, I can cut it off here and there will be lots and lots of roots that take over. So I'm going to assume that in the final image this is not going to be an issue, and indeed I can have this as a front of the tree. I could even plant it pretty much like this. Nice nebari, wide spreading roots, and all we need to do is backfill it with substrate and it's all done for this year. Standing by itself. Perfect. This is really turning out to be a great tree. And I want to add limesulpher to it. What it does is it protects the wood against fungal infections. And at the same time, this white color that you get also is from limesulpher. But I now realize I've not burned off the fiber. So let me do that first. So fibers are gone. And now with the gin liquid or limesulpher. This fluid is used a lot in bonsai to conserve that wood. It doesn't actually conserve the dead wood, it just protects it from fungal infection. But once a fungal infection occurs, the wood can still rot. And many people are concerned that this gets too white, too bleached. If you are amongst those as well, then what you could do is what I'm doing here, and I'll show you. I have a little bit of black ink next to me, and if you just add a little bit of black ink to it, then the wood won't go completely white. It will go an offset grayish, which is quite often just enough. So as it has been very, very dry, I don't actually have moss to put on top of this pot, even though I would like to put some moss here to help the roots. So what I've done, I've actually climbed on top of my shed and I've collected a few bits and pieces of old moss from the roof, all dry, dead. And I've got some cocoa husk, and I'm just going to put those together. So I've got a bit more volume. And then I'll sprinkle that on top of the pot. Put a mesh over it. And then let's see. Let's see whether this works. I don't know whether it works. It's a little bit of an experiment. But you know what? That's the only way to learn, right? New things. Nobody can tell you how it is done. Or you don't know anybody who's doing this. Just try. You see that the wood is quite yellow, and that will change over the next couple of days. So as this dries, it ages, then the wood will go white. And the limesulpher has a nice benefit that all the new deadwood and the old deadwood will have pretty much the same color. So this is one of those videos that has taken maybe 4 weeks to record, and I sometimes lose track of the story that I'm trying to tell. So my apologies if there's some breaks in the storyline. This is the tree now. It's about a week after I put the limesulpher on it. And what you can tell is now the trunk has gone fairly white, except for the parts where I applied the ink. And with the deadwood going white, you can also see that now the live vein is much more delineated here. I've put a mesh over the pot so that, yeah, the moss is actually coming up, so that the moss doesn't get disturbed by the birds once they start digging. Quite happy with it. And as said, now it just needs to stay in my garden, and over winter I might wire it out a little bit more. But you can tell I already cheekily put a little piece of wire there to bring this trunk in further. I'm thinking about bending it even further in that direction. But that's for winter. Now really this video is done.